then if people have been waiting for this thing to play, they can just come along and press the play button whenever they're ready to start watching it. I always put my AS2 layer just above everything because I'm not going to actually have anything in that. And then I'm just going to draw a quick temporary button here. I'm just using a rectangle in this case because it'll have a bounds box that's true to its actual size. Right, so the first thing we need to do is set up a loop so it plays this animation and then goes back to frame 1 and repeats the animation. So in frame 11 I'm inserting a keyframe, and then I'm just going to put a keyframe after frame 1, but I'm actually going to use the 1 in frame 1. So here on frame 1 I've selected it on the AS2 layer. I'm just going to double click the play on the timeline control, and then on frame 11 I've just selected it there. I've got go to and play. So here you can see it's got the type of method that you're going to use to actually go to and play a specific point, and you can see in bold it's telling me that this method uses frame, and here this is referring to a scene and a specific frame. But if the name of your scene is different, then it can become complicated and it's not always as accurate. So I'm using this frame example and I want to go back to frame 1. So now the action script will basically play, and then when it gets to this point it'll return to frame 1. Now in the middle of this, about frame 6, I'm going to insert another keyframe, and this keyframe here is basically going to check if the movie is loaded. Now my total number of frames for this preloader is 16, and if you recall I said if your movie had 40 frames in scene 2 and 200 frames in scene 1 that your global value would be 240 frames. But if you consider that I've just created these frames, then your global value has changed. So we've got an additional 16 frames added to the movie, so that takes us to 256 frames on total. You might have to crack out a calculator at some points. So what I'm going to do on the keyframe in frame 6, I'm going to close timeline control, and then on movie clip control correction, if you click depreciated and then actions, you'll see just below call an action script called if frame loaded, and it basically detects if a specific frame has loaded to the specific point you tell it, then it can do something. So if I double click that, and you can see here it's showing me a basic method. So in the actual brackets here I need to input a frame number. So we had frame 256. That's our last frame in this movie. And then can you see these inverted comma looking things here? Kind of like strange looking brackets. Now here they're actually open, and here they're closed on line 2 of the programming, and it basically means that you can put actions within these brackets. So what I'm going to do is if I hit enter, it puts in a new line of code, and here I'm going to put in a little code. So if my movie's actually loaded, what I want the timeline control to do is to go to and stop frame 12, because that's where my button's going to be. So back on global functions, make sure you clicked on line 2 or after the bracket, timeline control, go to and stop instead of go to and play, because I don't want it to play the button and then go onto the actual movie. I want it to stop dead so people can actually choose when to do it. So go to and stop frame 12. So now if the movie is loaded, it will stop playing that loop just here, and it will stop dead here with the button. And just to be safe, in frame 12, window actions, I'm just going to put a stop action on timeline control. Right, so the only thing left to do now is to program your button and create it as a symbol. So with the rectangle selected, I click modify, convert to symbol, and then instead of movie clip or graphic, I'm going for button. I'm just going to call it button 1 at this stage. So now this has been created as a button. So if I double click this button, you can see that the actual timeline within the button is different to your actual normal scene and keyframe style. And you've got different headings at the top: up, over, down and hit. And up basically means this is what the button's going to look like when it hasn't been pressed or the cursor isn't over it. So what I'm going to do is just slap in a little triangle that looks like a play symbol. Your button design could be anything you want, really. And it's not essential to actually edit your button. You know, you could just have it as a static button. Then if you click if you click once on hit and insert a keyframe, then it's copied the actual dimensions of your actual button, and I can just make that black or whatever. And what hit means, this is your hit area. So if the actual cursor is in this rectangle, then the button knows that you're about to click it and you're over it. So next I need to show you how it looks when the actual cursor is over that button. So if you insert a keyframe on over, and then I'm just going to make it slightly bigger in this keyframe, and I'm also going to add another layer just here, and I'm just going to put a little highlight over the actual button so you know it's been highlighted. So then selecting this yellow rectangle, and on the colour mixer I'm just going to put the alpha down to about 20. So you can see it's got a little hazing over it there. And then I'm going to insert a blank keyframe because I don't need it there. So that's how the button looks when you've got your mouse over it. And then down is basically how the button looks when it's been pressed. So I usually make it smaller so it looks like it's been depressed by being pushed on or whatever. And if this was a graphic symbol, I could just adjust the brightness to make it darker, but I'm just going to shift the colour down on the blue. So that's basically how my button looks in the different states. That's when nothing's happening. That's when the mouse is over it. That's when it's been pressed. And that just refers to the area that you need to be in to actually activate the button. So now this button is all set up and ready to go. If you open your actions window, then what you need to do to actually put actions on a button is click the button once, and you can see it's got a blue outline on its bounds box and it's been selected in its layer. And this basically means that the script I'm now going to put on the actions actually pertains to that button. So all I'm going to do on this button is a simple, if it's been pressed, action, go to the next frame after this scene. So if you scroll down to movie clip control, you've you've got an action called on, and double click on, and here it gives you the different circumstances in which you might press a button. So you've got roll over, which means if the mouse is moving over it, then it's going to do the action. If you've pressed the button, then you let go of your mouse, that's release. If you press it just once by clicking, that's press. You've also got key presses that pertain to actual specific keys on your keyboard. So I'm just going to use press. So on press, which means when it's been pressed, and then you can see I've got these inverted brackets again for putting actions on. So once the button's been pressed, I basically want my movie to go to and play the frame after this frame at the end here in frame 16. So if we think about the global values of the actual frame numbers, then the next frame after this scene would be frame 17. So I'm just going to press enter, and that's put in a new line of code, and then go to and play, double click that, and then it's got a frame number here. So I want 17, and that's all you need, and that basically means that pressing this button would take you to the start of the movie. So that's your preloader, the actual loading period where it's checking to see if you've loaded and looping back, and then the stopped frame in which the button is contained to actually progress the movie. And that's as simple as you can get, but remember, you can download your own tutorials, or you could download pre-made open source preloaders, and you won't actually be able to test your actual movie loading like this unless you've uploaded the actual Shockwave flash to web space and you're trying to view it on the internet. It won't work if you're just trying to open your file on your desktop, for instance. Another thing to bear in mind is you can see that my checker that checks if a specific frame is loaded, what I could do is make a step-by-step preloader, such as someone getting bigger or liquid decreasing in a bottle, something like that. I could insert a keyframe at this point, and then suppose I want it to say it's loaded 50%, then I could literally copy all these actions, and then in this keyframe I could paste those actions, and then I could half the amount of frames we've got here. So that would be 128. And then we could tell it to, like, suppose we've got an image that says 50%, we could tell it to go to frame 11, maybe it's stored there. So you get the idea. And don't forget, you can always use script assist to check everything, and you've also got a section here where you can check the syntax, and here it says that the script contains no errors, so it basically means you know you've done a good job. And you've got auto format just next to the tick, and that basically just makes everything, you know, a bit more ordered to it. I don't actually need line 4 here, so I could delete that. Apparently auto format thinks we do need a blank line after the action script. This little semicolon just means that the script has ended, and then the brackets just close that action there. So that just about covers actions and making a preloader. You might have some more, if you're any good at Virtual Basic or C Basic or Q or whatever it is, and you know you want to play around with programming a bit more, you can find tutorials on flashkit.com for making your own games, etc., but it can get really complicated, so my advice is just try and keep things simple. In the next part I'm going to go over making your own character library, and we're also going to cover walk cycles and run cycles, and we're also going to go over how to do speech, and I've got a few easy tips that make things a bit more simple, and I'm going to share them with you next time. So thanks for sticking with me, and I'll see you next time.